The Secret Drawings of St. Augustine. Chapter 1. The Attic's Whisper. Morning. It arrived. Too quiet. A month since Dad was gone. Daniel, my anchor, my rock. He left a gaping silence in our old house in St. Augustine, Florida. The salty air from the ocean, usually a comfort, now felt heavy. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the palm trees echoed his absence. I was Evelyn, 58 years old, a retired elementary school teacher, and now an orphan. I had put it off. The attic, Dad's sanctuary, his private world of maritime maps, old fishing gear, and dusty research papers. But it had to be done. The scent of old paper and sea salt hung in the air as I climbed the creaking stairs. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, piercing through the grimy window. I ran my hand over an old leather-bound trunk, its surface scarred by time and travel. This was his most cherished possessions. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, layers of his life unfolded. A faded Navy uniform, a collection of rare shells, a worn compass, and then tucked beneath a pile of brittle charts, almost invisible against the dark wood, a small, unmarked folder. It wasn't like his other organized files. This one felt hidden. My heart gave a strange little lurch. I pulled it out. My fingers trembled slightly. The folder was old, its cardboard brittle. I opened it. The first drawing, a vibrant blue ocean, a majestic whale breaching, childlike yet full of spirit. My breath hitched. And then at the bottom, scrawled in an unsteady hand, "For Daddy." For Daddy? My brow furrowed. I flipped to the next. A lighthouse, tall and proud, its beam cutting through a stormy sky. Again, "For Daddy." Another, a smiling dolphin, a tiny sailboat. Each one signed the same way, "For Daddy." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. These weren't mine. I knew my childhood drawings. They were safely packed away in boxes in my own closet, neatly labeled. Mine were stick figures and misshapen trees. These were different. Bold colors. A certain innocence, yes, but also a raw, untamed energy. And the subject matter. Always the ocean. Always. I was an only child. Daniel and my mother, bless her soul, had told me countless times, "You were our miracle, Evelyn." My parents were devoted, their lives revolving around me. This simply didn't fit. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A mistake? A forgotten relative? A friend's child? No. The signature was too personal. "For Daddy." It suggested a deep, loving bond. A wave of confusion washed over me, followed by a sharp, unexpected pang of betrayal. Not from Dad, not really, but from the universe. From the quiet, unwavering narrative of my life. My father, Daniel, the steady, predictable marine biologist, had a secret that now, in his absence, lay exposed in a stack of childlike drawings. My hands, still holding the folder, felt numb. The attic, once a place of quiet reverence, now hummed with an unspoken mystery. What did this mean? Who was this child? And why, after all these years, was I only just discovering her? Chapter 2. Traces in Time. The drawings became my obsession. Each one, a small, vibrant piece of a puzzle, I never knew existed. I spread them out on the old dining room table, the very table where we'd shared countless family meals, where Dad would tell stories of the sea, his eyes twinkling. Now the table was a silent witness to my growing disquiet. I studied every line, every smudge. The crayon colors, though faded, still held a certain vibrancy. The paper was thick, aged, but not brittle, almost like a silhouette I'd seen countless times. Could it be Anastasia Lighthouse? Our local landmark? It was a stretch, but my intuition pulled me towards it. The next few days blurred into a haze of restless sleep and frantic research. I pulled out old photo albums, searching for any clues, any faces that didn't quite fit. Nothing. Every picture was of our perfectly ordinary, perfectly happy family. No shadowy figures, no missing children, just us. I tried to recall Dad's past. He was always so open, so loving. He spoke of his childhood in Maine, his college years, his passion for the ocean. But he rarely delved into the specifics of the time before he met my mother. He'd always say, "Oh, that was a different lifetime, Evie. My real life began when I met your mom." I'd always brushed it off as a sweet sentiment. Now it felt like a deliberate avoidance, a red flag I'd been too naive to notice. One evening, staring at the lighthouse drawing, a tiny detail caught my eye. On the very bottom edge, almost imperceptibly, there was a faint, penciled inscription. I squinted, holding it up to the dim light of the lamp. It was barely legible, faded over decades. Anastasia Lighthouse, 1970. 1970. My heart pounded. That was years before I was born. My parents had met in 1972. This child, she existed before me. A tremor ran through me. This wasn't just a secret. It was a whole life, a whole experience that Dad had meticulously kept hidden. The betrayal I'd felt earlier now mixed with a profound sense of bewilderment. Who was this girl? And why? Why did Dad keep her drawings? I knew who could help. Tom O'Connell, our family friend, a local historian, an amateur genealogist, and a walking encyclopedia of St. Augustine lore. He knew every cobblestone, every whisper of history in this ancient city. He was the only person I trusted enough to share this bewildering discovery. I called him, my voice raspy with emotion. "Tom," I began, trying to sound calm. "I found something unusual in Dad's attic." He arrived an hour later, his kind, crinkled eyes full of concern. He sat across from me at the dining table, the drawings spread between us. His usual jovial demeanor had faded, replaced by a quiet gravity as he examined each piece. "These are truly remarkable, Evelyn," he murmured, tracing a finger over the whale drawing. "So much life in them." He looked at me, his gaze gentle. "You say they're not yours?" I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. "No." And that date, 1970. Dad, he never mentioned another child. Never. Tom picked up the lighthouse drawing, peering at the inscription. "Anastasia Lighthouse, 1970, he read aloud. "That's a definite clue. It grounds us to St. Augustine. And that year, that's interesting." He paused, lost in thought. Daniel was working for the Oceanic Research Institute back then, wasn't he? He had those field trips, he called them. Always vague about the details. I always assumed it was just research. My mind flashed back. Dad's field trips. Always a quick goodbye. A few days, sometimes a week or two. He'd come back, smelling of sea air, always a little tired, but otherwise unchanged. I never questioned it. Why would I? He was Dad. He was solid. What do you think, Tom? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed, his gaze drifting to the window, where the setting sun cast long shadows across the room. Evelyn, there are secrets. And then there are secrets that shape lives. These drawings, they feel like the latter. We need to dig deeper. The town archives, old newspapers, birth records, if we can access them. We need to find out who drew these, who Daddy was to them. A fragile hope sparked within me, a chance to unravel this mystery, a chance to understand the man I thought I knew so well. The search had begun. Chapter 3: Whispers from the Past. Our investigation began in the dusty, quiet corners of the St. Augustine Historical Society archives. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten stories. Tom, with his easy charm and encyclopedic knowledge of local history, navigated the labyrinthine shelves like a seasoned explorer. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of unease, as if I was disturbing something sacred, something best left buried. We started with the 1970s, old city directories, school records, birth announcements. Page after page, the names blurred into an indistinct hum. Nothing, no Daniel, connected to any child other than me. Then Tom found it, a yellowed newspaper clipping, tucked away in a microfiche reel from October 1970. The headline was stark: Fire ravages Sea Star Orphanage. Several children displaced. My breath hitched. Sea Star Orphanage, Tom read aloud, his finger tracing the faded print. It was a small place near the lighthouse, mostly for children whose parents worked seasonal jobs or had fallen on hard times. It closed down completely after the fire. We scanned the article, searching for names. Among the survivors, a girl, approximately 5 years old, identified only as Lila, was uninjured but remains unclaimed by family members. Lila, the name hung in the air, a fragile whisper from the past. A 5-year-old girl, in 1970, near the lighthouse. The pieces were starting to align, chillingly. Could this be her? The child who drew these vibrant pictures for Daddy. This is a lead, Evelyn, Tom said, his voice quiet. A strong one. A little girl, unclaimed, from an orphanage connected to the area of the lighthouse. It's too much of a coincidence. The thought that my father, a man I idolized, might have been involved in such a tragic event, keeping it hidden, sent a fresh wave of shock through me. What kind of connection could he have had to this orphanage, to this girl, Lila? Was he a volunteer, a donor, or something far more personal? We continued to dig. We found records of the orphanage, its brief history. It was indeed a place where children often stayed for short periods, sometimes abandoned, sometimes simply left there by parents who couldn't cope. The fire had been devastating, scattering the remaining children to other facilities or foster homes. Lila's name appeared a few more times in the meager records, unclaimed, transferred to a state-run adoption agency. The trail grew cold after that. A few days later, while sifting through another box of Dad's personal effects, hoping for another clue, I found it, tucked inside an old, leather-bound journal, dated 1970. It wasn't a diary, but a scientific log filled with notes on marine life. Yet, on one page, a small, square photograph was carefully pressed between the pages. My heart stopped. It was Dad, younger, his hair a little darker, his smile a little less creased. He was crouched down by what looked like a wooden fence near the water, and beside him, a small girl, no older than 5 or 6. She was holding up a drawing, a vibrant blue ocean, a majestic whale breaching, the exact drawing I had found in the folder. The girl's face was sweet, wide-eyed, with a scattering of freckles. Her hair was light, almost golden, and on her neck, a delicate silver chain with a small pendant, a sea star. Behind them, barely visible, faded and worn, a sign. Only a few letters were legible. Sea Star Orphanage. I gasped, the words tumbling out. Tom, who was sipping coffee in the living room, rushed in. I thrust the photographs into his hand. He studied it, his eyes widening. Evelyn, this is her. This is Lila, and this is your father. His voice was hushed, reverent. He was there. He knew her. The weight of the revelation pressed down on me. My father, so young, so full of unspoken sorrow, perhaps. He wasn't just a donor or a volunteer. He was with her. He was connecting with her. He was daddy to her. The thought sent shivers down my spine. Why had he kept it hidden for so long? What untold story did this photo represent? What had happened to Lila? Had he ever seen her again? The questions flooded my mind, each one more urgent than the last. This wasn't just about a secret. It was about a hidden chapter of my father's life, a chapter that now demanded to be read. Chapter 4, The Unclaimed Child. The photograph of Dad and Lila became our new compass. We studied every detail. The backdrop, though blurred, confirmed our suspicions. The fence, the distant hint of the lighthouse, the sea star partial sign. It solidified the connection between Daniel, Lila, and the orphanage. He must have been a volunteer there, Tom mused, his brow furrowed in thought. He always had a soft spot for children, and the timing, 1970. You said he was working at the Oceanic Research Institute then. Perhaps his research took him close to the orphanage, and he simply decided to help out. But why the secret? Why keep it hidden for over 5 decades? This wasn't just about helping out. The drawings, the photo, the profound care with which he'd kept them, it spoke of a deep, personal bond. We broadened our search, focusing on adoption records from that era. Tom, with his connections, managed to access some restricted information. It was painstaking work. Many children from orphanages, especially after a disaster like a fire, were often quickly moved, adopted, or placed in foster care, sometimes losing their original identities in the process. Days turned into nights, fueled by stale coffee and the persistent urge to uncover the truth. We looked for any record of a Lila from the Sea Star Orphanage being adopted, especially within Florida or surrounding states. We cross-referenced names, dates, and even subtle changes in spelling. Then a flicker of hope. A record from a state-run adoption agency in Tallahassee. A 5-year-old girl, listed as Jane Doe, formerly Lila, was adopted in early 1971 by a family named Miller from a small town just outside of Jacksonville, Florida. The details were sparse, but one critical piece of information stood out. The girl's original birth date matched Lila's age at the time of the fire. And, almost as a silent confirmation, a notation regarding a small silver sea star pendant found with the child. My heart leaped. The sea star pendant, the one I saw in the photograph, dangling around Lila's neck. This had to be her. This was the girl. Anna Miller, Tom read the adopted name. She would be 59 now, just a few years older than you. Evelyn. The surge of complex emotions washed over me. Relief that we had found her. Sadness for the life she must have endured. And a profound sense of wonder at the intricate web of fate that had connected her to my father, and now to me. The next step was daunting. Contacting her. How do you approach someone with such a deeply buried past? How do you tell a stranger that your deceased father was a significant secret figure in their early, forgotten years? That her childhood drawings were kept by him for half a century? I decided to write a letter, a careful, gentle letter. I explained who I was, my discovery of the drawings, and the journey that led me to her. I included a photocopy of one of the drawings and the photograph of her with Dad. I expressed my deepest apologies for intruding, but conveyed the profound importance of this connection. I enclosed my phone number and email address, leaving the choice to her. The letter was sent. Then came the agonizing wait. Every phone call, every email notification made my heart pound. Days passed. A week. 2 weeks. I started to lose hope. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe the past was too painful to revisit. Or maybe she simply didn't remember. Then, one quiet Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. My hand trembled as I answered. Hello? My voice was barely a whisper. Evelyn? A soft, hesitant voice, female, older. This is Anna Miller. I received your letter. My breath caught in my throat. It was her, Lila, the girl from the drawings, the one my father had kept a secret for so long. The untold story was finally about to unfold. Chapter 5. The Echoes of Memory. Anna's voice was gentle, a little raspy, but held a surprising warmth. We spoke for an hour that first time. She told me she lived in a small, quiet town outside Jacksonville, not too far from St. Augustine. She worked as a librarian. Her adopted parents had been kind, loving people, but had never spoken about her early life. She knew she was adopted, of course, but the details were always vague. They had told her she was found at a small orphanage after a fire, but they never mentioned the name of the place or any other specifics. They wanted her to have a fresh start, free from any trauma. I have no memories of before the Millers, she admitted, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. It's like a blank slate. I always wondered, but you learn to live with it, don't you? Then she mentioned the drawings, the pictures, they're beautiful, and the photograph. It's so strange. That man, your father, he looks so kind. And that little girl, is that really me? I have this faint feeling, like a distant echo, when I look at them, a feeling of comfort, of safety. That word, comfort, it resonated deep within me. My father, he always provided comfort. We arranged to meet, a small cafe in a neutral location, halfway between our towns. I wanted to be respectful, to give her space, to not overwhelm her with the weight of this revelation. The day of our meeting dawned bright and clear. My stomach churned with a mixture of nerves and excitement. I recognized her immediately, not from the faded photograph, but from something deeper. The same wide, kind eyes, a certain gentle curve to her smile. She was sitting by the window, a book open in front of her, but her gaze was fixed on the street, clearly waiting. Anna? I approached her table, my voice soft. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. A flicker of recognition, or perhaps just curiosity, crossed her face. Evelyn. We sat down, a comfortable silence settling between us for a moment. Then I pulled out the folder, the drawings. I laid them gently on the table. Anna reached out a hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the whale drawing. It's so vivid, she whispered. I can almost hear the ocean. She looked at the signature, for Daddy. A tear tracked its way down her cheek. I did this? I nodded, my own eyes welling up. Yes, Anna, you did. And Dad, He kept them for 55 years. Then I showed her the photograph. Dad, young and strong, kneeling beside her, a gentle smile on his face, and around her neck, the tiny sea star pendant. Anna gasped. Her hand went to her own neck, touching the subtle curve of a scar. I always wore a pendant, she said, her voice choked with emotion. It was lost during the fire. My adopted mother said it was a family heirloom, but I always wondered. She looked at the photo again, then back at the drawings. A wave of memories, faint at first, then stronger, began to flood her eyes. He taught me about the ocean, she began, her voice gaining strength, as if unearthing long-buried treasures. He used to bring me shells and tell me stories about the whales. He called them gentle giants. He said I was just like them, gentle but strong. She paused, her gaze fixed on the drawing of the lighthouse. And the lighthouse, we used to walk to it. He'd hold my hand. It was always so tall, so safe. Her voice broke. He was Daddy, my daddy. A profound sorrow settled over me. My father, he had been a daddy to this little girl, long before I ever came into the world. He had loved her, he had cherished her, and he had kept it all a secret. Chapter 6. A father's secret, a daughter's understanding. We talked for hours. Anna recounted the fragmented memories that now, with the aid of the drawings and the photograph, were slowly piecing themselves together. She remembered Dad visiting the orphanage, not as a casual volunteer, but as a consistent, comforting presence. He would spend hours with her, reading, drawing, taking her on walks to the nearby beach, always focused on the ocean. He had such kind eyes, she recalled, a soft smile gracing her lips. He smelled like the sea, and he always made me feel special, like I mattered. Then the memory of the fire. It was so scary. Smoke everywhere. Screaming. He was there. He pulled me out. He carried me. And then, I don't remember much after that. Just being in a different place and missing him, always missing him. My father, a hero, not just to me, but to this little girl. He had saved her, and then he had lost her. Why didn't he? Anna's voice trailed off, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Why didn't he adopt her? Why didn't he find her? I shared what I knew of Dad's life in 1970. He had recently lost his first child, a baby girl, who had died shortly after birth. My parents had met a year after that. He was devastated by the loss, consumed by grief. He threw himself into his work and, as I now understood, into volunteering at the orphanage. Lila, a lost and vulnerable child, must have filled a void in his broken heart. He couldn't have another child then, not immediately. He was still reeling from the loss, perhaps financially unstable, and not yet ready to form another family unit. He was simply trying to survive his own grief. He must have tried, Anna, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He must have wanted to, but the system, it was different back then, and perhaps he was too broken to fight for it. Or he thought it would be too painful to bring another child into his life, only to lose her again. The unspoken truth was heavy in the air. He had loved her. He had been her daddy. But circumstances, and perhaps his own profound grief, had prevented him from keeping her. And he had carried that burden, that secret love and loss, for the rest of his life. He kept your drawings. I reminded her, my voice gentle. Every single one. He never forgot you." Anna reached out and gently touched the faded signature on one of the drawings. "He was my first memory of love," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My first daddy, and he kept me in his heart." It wasn't a story of abandonment. It was a story of a different kind of love. A love born of shared vulnerability, a desperate need for connection in the face of profound loss and the silent, enduring grief of a man who carried a secret sorrow. My father. He was not just the solid, unwavering figure I knew. He was a man with a hidden past, a deep capacity for love, and a quiet, lifelong heartache. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. The initial shock and hurt I felt at my father's secret had slowly dissolved, replaced by a profound understanding and a deeper appreciation for the complex man he truly was. He wasn't perfect. He had kept a part of himself hidden. But it wasn't out of malice or deceit. It was out of a deep-seated love, a need to protect his new family, and perhaps a need to protect himself from the pain of a past loss. Anna and I spent the rest of the day together. We visited the old site of the Sea Star Orphanage, now a quiet, overgrown lot near the lighthouse. We walked the familiar path to the Anastasia Lighthouse, where her faint childhood memories had been tied to my father's loving presence. It was a pilgrimage, a way to connect the past with the present, to weave together the disparate threads of our lives. "He saw me," Anna said, her voice soft as we stood by the lighthouse, the salty breeze whipping our hair. "He truly saw me, even when no one else did." I felt a profound connection to her, not just through our shared connection to Daniel, but as women, as daughters, coming to terms with the hidden complexities of a parent's life. We found common ground in our shared experiences, our laughter, our tears. We realized we were not just two strangers connected by a secret, but two souls brought together by a common love. "You know," Anna said, turning to me, a tentative smile on her face, I think we're sisters, in a way." My heart swelled. "Yes," I said, tears blurring my vision. "Yes, we are. We promise to stay in touch, to build a new relationship, one born from a shared history and a newfound bond." The drawings, once a source of confusion and disquiet, now hung framed in my living room, a testament to a father's enduring love and a reminder of the sister I never knew I had. The silence in the house, once heavy with my father's absence, now felt different. It was no longer a void, but a quiet space filled with memories, both old and new. Memories of Daniel, the man who was both father and secret guardian. And memories of Lila, now Anna, the woman who brought a new chapter to my life. I understood now. My father hadn't hidden this out of a lack of love for me or my mother. He had hidden it because some loves are too profound, too painful to ever truly share. Some griefs are carried in the deepest parts of the heart, protected and cherished in silence. And sometimes it takes a lifetime for those secrets to finally surface, bringing with them not just revelations, but a deeper understanding, forgiveness, and the unexpected gift of a new family. The story of Daniel and Lila was not just a tragic tale of loss. It was a beautiful, complicated tapestry of love, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. And I, Evelyn, his daughter, was now a part of that tapestry, forever changed by the secret drawings of St. Augustine.